A very good morning to you all. My name's Tarzem Shoker. I'm the marketing manager for the Lincoln International Business School, and I'd like to welcome you to another edition of Resilient Lincolnshire Executive Education. So today's webinar is a special spotlight on a subject which is close to my heart, as it involves a very good friend of mine, and I'm grateful for the opportunity through the Resilient Lincolnshire webinar series that I've been given the opportunity to be able to discuss this today. So very shortly, I will bring on my guests, my special guest. But first of all, I wanted to sort of introduce the Kubler-Ross grief model, which some of you may be sort of familiar with. It's a simple model to help establish where one is and provide some sort of sense and support when dealing with grief or some sort of life trauma there. So I'll just show our model to our people here. So, okay, so this model here, so throughout our lives, we obviously, we'll all probably at some point or another will experience instances of grief which can be caused by various situations. And it may be things like, children may grieve over a divorce, a wife may grieve over the death of her husband, teenager over ending of a relationship, or in this case news of a terminal medical condition there. So where did the Kubler-Ross grief model cycle sort of originate? So back in 1969, a Swiss psychiatrist by the name of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, she described 5 popular stages of grief. And her model was based off with her working with terminally ill patients. Now, the model at the time actually did receive quite a lot of criticism, as those sort of studying it believe the stages were a specific order in which people actually grieved. However, later on, Kubler-Ross did note that these stages are not linear, and in some cases, you may not experience any of them, or you may only actually undergo a couple of stages, when you're going through such an event or scenario as such there. So now, whilst we're sort of relating this to a medical condition, the purpose of today's webinar, this can also sort of resonate with businesses and individuals as well. And I think the pandemic is a good example, actually, of this. It's created scenarios for organizations and individuals where there's been a sense of loss, and either because the business has not been able to sustain itself throughout this period, and as well as employees who've been sort of made redundant, that this has all had a bit of an impact on people. And all this when really a few months ago, this wasn't on the horizon at all, and everything sort of seemingly sort of looked fine. And we know, obviously, as a result of this, people have sort of gone through various sort of cycles of denial and anger as such, and even depression. But some businesses and organisations have come out the other end with that acceptance element and being innovative and being able to sort of look at their businesses in a way which can mean survival for them as well. But equally, we've had people who've had job losses, being made redundant, where the anger and frustration, they've probably sort of spent quite a bit of period in there. But maybe even depression, with the fear of sort of income sort of not coming into the household, the impact it's having on their family as such there as well. But of course, I wanted to have a look at this, not only, obviously mentioning it from a business perspective, but largely from this sort of medical view of MND. And one of the things with the Kubler-Ross model here that I wanted to point out is that actually, as Kubler-Ross says, it's not a linear model here. And you can spend, a various amount of sort of times in different stages of this cycle as well, and you don't necessarily have to sort of actually experience any of it sometimes, or maybe 1 or 2 stages there itself. So I think this is a good time for us to sort of introduce our guest, actually. So I wanted to bring on Alex Gibson, who is the chair and founder of Challenging MND. And I also wanted to bring on Andrew Capert, who is the CEO of Challenging MND. So welcome, gentlemen. How are you this morning? You just got your mics on, so you might want to unmute your mics. How are you, Alex? And Andrew, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm good, Taz. Thank you very much. Yes. So, yeah, excited and for you to invite us on today, which is fantastic. So, yeah, really happy.
Very good, Taz. And thanks for the invite this morning.
No problem, Alex. Well, I mean, it's an honour to have you guys on here, and it's a real pleasure of mine to be able to sort of host you guys, and to be able to sort of tell your story, sort of, you know, in relation to this to the Kubler-Ross grief cycle here. So, Alex, I'm going to start off with you, if you don't mind, and maybe to give our sort of audience a bit of a background to who you are and what you've done in the past, sort of pre-MND. Maybe if you want to start off and tell us a bit more about yourself.
Yeah, I suppose I've working in AIG insurance company where I've been for over 10 years now. I'm a capital modeler, and I devise or build particular regulatory models for the company across email. And I suppose I'm working in capital management. I'm a chartered accountant. Previously, I've always pushed myself, you know, to achieve as much as possible throughout my life. I have a first-class honours degree in chemistry from Loughborough University. I have a master's in forensic science from King's College London. In fact, shortly afterwards, I worked for the MOD on the Ministry of Defence on the explosives for a brief period of time before making the move into the city. I'm a qualified nutritional therapist and a personal trainer at the same time, and you know, having spent many years playing rugby to national level 1 standard for 2 or 3 clubs. I then achieved my full honours in athletics. So I was called up to, you know, represent Great Britain in decathlon in the land of giants at the age of 24.
Absolutely, that sounds very, very impressive, Alex. And I know sort of firsthand from your sort of athletic experiences that you know, you're sort of very dedicated to your health and fitness, and you know, lead a very sort of if you like, a meticulous sort of lifestyle, and a big believer in sort of keeping fit and healthy, I guess. So so Alex, give us a bit of an overview how sort of Challenging MND started, so in the lead up to this.
Yeah, I suppose I was actually diagnosed in 2.5 years ago, January 2018, with Motor Neurone Disease. And those symptoms unfortunately affected me prior to that, probably a year before. I'd say when I first noticed obvious signs of the disease itself. And the charity was really created on was registered March of last year, and the whole purpose is reach out to those sufferers and provide MND sufferers with memorable experience to enable them to, basically have or achieve any particular goals, challenges, or even events as such. So it's we're aiming to be a go-to charity for MND sufferers, and hopefully this will massively grow nationally as well.
Fantastic. Sounds great, Alex. And it's obviously, I know there's been a lot of hard work going on to be able to get you to this sort of current stage as well. Want to bring Andrew in here at this point. And Andrew, I know you've been absolutely instrumental behind Challenging MND in terms of getting these events organised and set up and run and executed. Can you give us maybe, I know you've done sort of a lot of stuff here, but maybe give us some highlights on some of your sort of key events that you ran since the start of the charity.
Yeah, well, Taz, I think the key thing is kind of almost in the title of the charity, Challenging MND. It means so many things in terms of that we're actually looking at, not sitting back. And I know we'll discuss this a little bit later. Alex definitely doesn't sit back and accept he's done. He fulfills his life. When he lists all the things that he's done and what he's qualified in, I suppose a lot of us think, crikey, what have we been doing with our time? So. But the highlights really last year. You've joined us for a couple of the challenges. When to scale the 3 weeks and then cycle the 480 miles in between, which we thought, well, we're never going to top that. And then all of a sudden, Alex thinks, right, okay, what's the next challenge? And then a few weeks ago, you joined us on the double marathon walk, which was 25 hours of walking was just ridiculously hard, and then Alex goes and does the pedalo challenge, last week, and I suppose that the highlight for me is from the stuff that we're probably going to touch on in a little bit, is that there's only one thing that's holding you back 9 times out of 10, and that's your mindset. And the things we've learned from Alex with his mindset is that you can always push yourself that little bit more. We went through some very tough times over a couple of challenges, you and I, but we do it. And I think it's fair to say we're not spring chickens anymore. And it is the highlight for me really has been the attitude that we've been able to through Alex's endeavours, and not just Alex, but also the people supporting the charity, is that I'm getting people that are being inspired who haven't even met Alex, who ring me up and say, do you know what, I'm going to do a triathlon next year. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. It's incredible how the deeds of one person can affect so many others. And I think when you go on to talking about the different stages of the Kubler-Ross module, that it will be highlighted that this can be kind of attracted to all parts of life, really, that we go through.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned the pedalo challenge there, Andrew, and I want to say a massive congratulations to Alex and yourself and the rest of the team who basically broke the world record for sort of traveling the fastest along the River Thames, and I believe it's 128 miles you covered. If you want to maybe just give us a little bit of insight in terms of what the record was and what you got it down to, actually.
Alex, do you want to take that one, or drop me to?
Yeah, I don't mind. So it's basically 128 miles long, starting at Lechlade in Gloucestershire, ending at Teddington near Ham in London. And it was a fantastic achievement. But the previous record set 2 years ago to this day was 4 days and just under 13 hours. And we basically smashed it up in 2 days and was it 2 days, 15 hours?
It was 62 hours. So we were Yeah, we were just short of 3 days.
That's it.
Just over 3 days. So
it's a fantastic achievement. You know, it was a pleasure to be involved, and I'm certainly proud of the whole team and all the support team, which were part and parcel of the whole, process in delivering that event.
No, that's amazing, absolutely amazing that to be able to sort of take off practically sort of 2 days off that record, and I know after sort of speaking to you afterwards, you were determined to sort of put it in a place where it would sort of, certainly if anyone else attempted, it would hurt them to try and get anywhere near it, so they'd have to go through some pain to try and beat that. So hats off to you guys for sort of getting that far. Fantastic. So I wanted to sort of move on, and let's talk about the Kubler-Ross then. And I'm just going to bring it onto our screen, Alex. And Alex, this is where sort of really sort of keen to hear about your experience in relation to this model that we've got here. And so if you want to maybe sort of take us through, at the beginning when you first got diagnosed, Alex, did you find that you went through a denial stage at all? Was there sort of that shock element that you sort of went through?
Yeah, I suppose it was a massive shock to all who knew me, and obviously myself as well. I suppose it had been building for some time prior to that diagnosis date. And the reason it was a building was because I was having obvious symptoms associated with the condition, tripping over regularly. I probably have 2 to 3 falls every day nowadays, and it was just because damage to the cerebellum, lower part of the brain, causes you to trip over quite a few times. And I suppose the voice started to slow down as a result of MND. It sounded quite slow and slurred and dysrhythmic. And that was obviously a telltale sign to something more sinister behind the scene. I mean, with MND, you're basically, there's no one conclusive test to diagnose you. So you basically go through a series of testing, tests and various elements to try to, eliminate all the key diseases. As a result, I basically had probably a year and a half of testing before they finally come back to me and said, "This is what you have." And it was obviously a major shock to me. There were a few tears from everyone in that room, and it was emotional time, but at the same time, it was what you do next.
Yeah, and Alex, obviously, it was a massive shock. And did you find yourself sort of questioning yourself in any shape or form in terms of not necessarily? Well, it's almost like a why me scenario,
Yeah,
So.
I suppose so, Tyson. The thing is, I always felt that the reason I've got MND in the first place was because all the heavy, intensive training I used to perform as a national level decathlete. When you're training 2 to 3 times every day, and those training sessions take you to a very dark place, you have to wonder if that's associated with it. And I've always felt that is real reason why, I mean, whether it's proven or not, it's the main reason why I've had MND. A particular deficiency which is formed along the line, nutritional deficiency, maybe 2 or 3 of them has certainly triggered off MND. I've always further.
Sure, no, absolutely. And was there an element of where as you sort of look at the Kubler-Ross sort of cycle there, did you feel sort of angry at at the whole sort of scenario, which sort of left you sort of in a different state, basically?
Yeah, very much. I suppose anger. It's very much resentment, anger. It's quite ironic, really, how when you take, perfect care of your health and the fitness throughout your life, that MND comes knocking at your door. I've never abused alcohol, drugs, or smokes, or anything like that. And it's quite ironic, really, how, it's come up and bit me on the bum as such.
Absolutely. And what sort of obviously whilst sort of going through this in terms of looking at the sort of bargaining stage, there was an element of sort of reaching out, or to saying, well, if only I'd done this, or if only I'd done that, maybe things might have been different, maybe or maybe not. Was there an element of sort of reflection in that way?
Very much so. I've always said, potentially heavy intensive training triggered it off in the first place, but there's not one thing I've changed about all of my life to date. I'm quite pleased with not the MND diagnosis, but the way my life has panned out over up to now. So I'm very grateful, to be honest. And it's not just anger from myself in terms of the disease or condition, but anger in terms of all the close people to you, family and close friends. You tend to be a lot more spiky with them, and it's times like this which is very tough to take, really, and it certainly makes you more aware of those tantrums and outbursts, I suppose.
Absolutely. And Alex, people sort of experiencing some level of grief or trauma, would often, more than likely, it wouldn't be unusual if they would sort of went into themselves and didn't want to speak to people and wanted to sort of hide away from the world effectively, whilst to sort of try and get their head round, whatever sort of situation they're in. Did you find yourself at all in any sort of situation like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, Taras, and I suppose there's an element of retracting from everyday life. I was very conscious about the way I sounded when I'm out in social environments, but to be honest, nowadays I couldn't care less, and it's one of those, I suppose, bargaining aspects of the cycle that you have to deal with, and nowadays people can think what they think of myself, and it really is water of duck's back as such. I couldn't really care too much about what people think, and it's associated with all that trauma of dealing with MND, and then what you've got ahead of you. You know, with the typical prognosis rate of 2 to 3 years following official diagnosis, you have to live your life as full and as best you can. And that's certainly what you appreciate when you're diagnosed with a life terminal illness like MND.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Alex, in terms of sort of, you know, obviously there's no sort of time limit as to how long people can spend in these sort of different stages there. What you know, how quickly or how slowly did you sort of move from, you know, accepting it to, well, I say from sort of being diagnosed and hearing and feeling that sense of shock to getting up to the point of acceptance? Did you find you sort of lingered in any particular stage, or did you find that, you know, that transition for you was sort of quicker because of your sort of positive mindset?
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned earlier, Tars, cycle isn't a dynamic sequential flow from one phase to the next. It basically jumps about, and then, you know, you can revisit each of the previous phases at times as you reflect on, you know, things going forward. I've always tried to move to the acceptance stage, the final stage, as soon as I can. And to be honest, by doing this, it enables me to draw a line in the sand, move on, and face my new modified future, whatever it is, as best I can.
Absolutely. And in that acceptance stage, Alex, is, you know, what sort of mindset are you in when you say you've accepted it? You know, what does that mean, and how does that sort of manifest itself in terms of what you do?
Yeah, I suppose with the acceptance stage, you basically learn to deal with all the symptoms associated with it. I've always been heavily involved in understanding the condition as best I can, and I spend numerous hours and days basically looking at MND, and there's always an aspect of looking at, I suppose it's human nature. You know, you always look at life as a worst case, and but there are certainly people out there who can live with MND for many years to come, and you shouldn't basically associate yourself with the worst case. I've always been a very, you know, positive person, and you have to be extremely adaptable to, you know, change to the circumstances which present themselves as and when they arise. So I think the positivity has certainly helped me, you know, to get to that acceptance stage far quicker than any average person would do.
Yeah,
and I understand at the same time that although I didn't, I've never really struggled with depression, but you certainly understand how people can feel. And this, you know, every person has a different, you know, different way of dealing with things as best they can.
Quite right, and I think it's a testament to yourself, Alex, in terms of, you know, the mindset, and as you know, as Andrew sort of alluded earlier, in terms of, you know, it really is, you have such a resilient attitude towards this, and you've tackled it sort of head on, as you have done you know, in the past with all your sort of athletic achievements and stuff, and it's you know, been sort of challenged. You know, you challenged MND, you know, in that sense, and taken it full on there. So yeah, well done.
Right. Can I just quickly mention one point? You know,
Sure.
in terms of speeding up to get to the acceptance stage as soon as you can, the best thing I've learned in life is basically surround yourself with, you know, positive people. Hence why we got Caro or Andrew at the, you know, forefront of our charity. You know, he does a fantastic job, and it's you know, you have to surround yourself with positive people to take you forward.
Absolutely, quite right. So, and I just wanted to sort of bring Andrew back in here actually, and you know, and thank you very much for that, Alex. And as always, these things, it's so interesting to sort of listen to you and hear what you've got to say, and time runs away with us very quickly as well in this webinar. But Andrew, I mean, it's you know, you've been in, as Alex has just sort of mentioned, you've been absolutely instrumental in being, you know, a positive force, if you like, you know, surrounding Alex and along with other people as well. You know, what from your perspective, you know, how do you sort of deal with that and sort of help Alex on almost on a daily basis in that sense?
Yeah, it's really interesting, you know, for Alex to say, you know, to surround yourself with positive people. But I think it kind of emanates from the person themselves, first of all. You know, I've listened to Alex do, you know, many kind of corporate talks, and we've talked to children of all ages, infant schools, junior schools, senior schools, and where Alex says about getting to acceptance stages, it is very important. It is very important to surround yourself with people. I feel that my role in Alex's life is for me to be talking about the charity to him and dealing with the charity and fixing these crazy challenge ideas that he comes up with. You know, I kind of always think once I've nailed one, I think, oh no, what's he going to ask me to do next year? So the beauty of that is that keeps me really, really positive in myself. You know, we had a conversation the other evening actually, that, you know, about this, that, you know, I don't talk to Alex too much about his MND, not that it's ever far from my mind, and it's not far from Alex's, but what we do talk about is the charity moving forward. What's the next thing? How can we help people? And that's the big challenge now, is to get more people on board. With COVID, it slowed down our progress a little bit as a charity in terms of bringing beneficiaries on board, but hopefully by doing something like this and seeing the stuff that Alex is doing, we will, the charity, that people, you know, give us a call and let's see what we can do. I think it's really important as well that a huge thing with Alex's drive and the way he conducts his life is that he doesn't let MND define him. He doesn't let MND, you know, define what sort of person he is, what he can do and what he can't do. It's, you know, Alex has absolutely celebrated every part of what he is doing now as a celebration. As we know, when we did the 52-mile walk the other week, that was because Alex, you know, called it a celebration that he can still use his legs. And, you know, the amazing thing when we talk about mindset and positivity is that Alex set himself a goal of 14,000 steps every day and averages 17,000 steps a day. And he's kept that record going now for over 390, or, you know, almost 400 days. He even did the 17,000 steps the day after we did the double marathon tires. We know what shape we were in the next day, but he got found by one of the guys walking the dog in the woods. And it's, you know, so positivity works two ways. Positivity definitely works two ways. And because you reach that acceptance stage doesn't mean you may not, I think Alex touched on this, you may not drop back a little bit and then have to find that acceptance stage again. But mainly what I gained from being involved in Alex's life is that we just push on. We push on to the next challenge. We push on to the, who's the next beneficiary that we can bring on board. How do we get out to the beneficiaries now? Because we're a small charity. We've had a massive up curve in the last few months with the exposure on Channel 5, ITV, Talk Radio. Our job now is to continue that momentum, and also remember the reason why we started the charity was because we did a charity rugby match a couple of years ago, and we wanted to raise some money for Alex, because he'd already raised lots of money for charity by doing cycling the Outer Hebrides and a 100-mile walk over the weekend. But a credit to Alex is that he didn't want that. He didn't want that. He said, "But can I use the money to start a charity?" And I think that speaks volumes about him as a man and as a person. And also at that early stage of us finding out about his diagnosis, he was already thinking of kind of creeping over that acceptance line and thinking, how can I make other people's lives better? And it's quite rare in this day and age with so much bad stuff's going on in our lives to see that kind of humbleness and selflessness really to help others.
Yeah, absolutely. And Andrew, and that leads me on to sort of obviously on what have you got planned next? Obviously you've had some great challenges, and what next, can we sort of expect next year?
Okay, well, true Alex style, as soon as we finished the Pedalo challenge, he sent me a text with a list of 4 challenges that he wanted to do next year. We may have to prioritise those a little bit, but our immediate future is next week. When you think he would have had enough of a Pedalo, one of our beneficiaries, Natalie Shaw, who lives in Chelmsford. So Natalie and Alex are going to be on the Pedalo up the River Chelmer. 11 miles, going up River Chelmer, and that will be shared with lots of Natalie's friends and family. So we're kind of thinking along the lines of every mile, Alex and Natalie will pull over, and then there'll be 2 more people get on the back, and we talk about everyone's Everest being different. Alex does real extreme challenges, but someone walking a mile could be as hard as walking 52 miles. So that's the immediate one. We've also got our abseil day on the 26th of September. So that will be abseiling off of the orbit outside the London Stadium, so the big red structure. So once again, we're opening up. We've got a beneficiary called Thurston who will be attending that, and we're looking to open it up to other people living with MND and anyone who wants to take part. So we've got that, and then we've got our mud run in October, which we did. And as for Alex's challenges, he's desperate to do a 7-day survival week somewhere next year, which we're in the process of sorting out. He did mention to me about an 8-man pedalo across the channel. I'm not too sure about that. But the one that we will be doing next year will be, we did the 3 Peaks, as you know, you was on that, Tars, the 3 Peaks challenge last year. We're looking at doing something similar, but with kayaking. So it'd be the 3 lakes. So it'd be Loch Orr in Scotland, biggest lake in Scotland, Lake Windermere, biggest lake in England, and Lake Barla, biggest lake in Wales. So we're looking at kayaking that and cycling the 360 miles in between. We've also had a couple of people volunteer to actually swim Lake Windermere as well. So
cracking stuff, fantastic. Well, listen, we've run out of time here, but that's absolutely amazing, and I just want to thank Alex and Andrew for sort of making the time to sort of join me today and being part of this webinar. So thank you very much, gentlemen, and best of luck, going forwards with the charity, and I'm sure with such a sort of positive mindset and great team behind you, we'll look out for some wonderful more stuff that'll come out there. So I just want to thank our viewers for tuning in today, and you can sort of catch up if you've sort of missed out. Catch up on YouTube or Facebook again. And thank you very much for tuning in, and look out for our next Resilient Lincolnshire webinar series. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank you for having us, Taz.